The story begins not in the grandeur of ancient palaces, but in the quiet workrooms of an archaeologist piecing together fragments of the past. In 1938, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm König, then working as the director of the National Museum of Iraq, stumbled upon an artifact that would puzzle the world for decades to come. It was found near Qujat Rabu, a village just outside Baghdad, an area long known for yielding relics from the Parthian and Sasanian periods. At first glance, the object was unremarkable. It appeared to be a small clay jar, roughly 6 inches tall, capped with a stopper made of asphalt. Inside, however, was something that demanded closer attention. A rolled-up copper cylinder had been carefully fitted within the jar. Suspended in the middle of this copper tube was an iron rod, its surface corroded but still intact. The pieces fit together so precisely that it was clear this was not a random collection of discarded items. Someone had built it with intention. To König, this discovery was electrifying, literally. His training as an archaeologist and his familiarity with modern science allowed him to see beyond the surface. He recognized that this strange object bore a striking resemblance to the components of a galvanic cell, what we today would call a battery. A clay container acting as a casing, a copper cylinder forming the cathode, and an iron rod as the anode, all the essential parts of a device capable of producing electricity. But what was such a thing doing in the ruins of an ancient Mesopotamian settlement? When König published his findings in 1938, he proposed that the artifact, which soon became known as the Baghdad Battery, might have been used for electrochemical purposes nearly 2,000 years before Alessandro Volta created the modern battery in 1800. His claim was bold, and it shook both the academic world and the public imagination. Was it possible that ancient Mesopotamians had discovered electricity long before the modern age? The archaeological context only deepened the mystery. The jars were discovered in a region that had seen the rise and fall of multiple empires, the Parthians, the Sasanians, and others who had ruled Mesopotamia. Each of these civilizations had advanced knowledge in metallurgy, craftsmanship, and chemistry. But electricity, that seemed too advanced, almost anachronistic. Skeptics quickly pushed back. Many argued that the so-called Baghdad Battery might simply have been a storage vessel, perhaps for scrolls, sacred texts, or even for holding papyrus rolled around the metal rod. Others suggested it could have been a container for holding sacred oils used in rituals. After all, thousands of clay jars had been found in Mesopotamia, and most served mundane or ceremonial purposes. Why should this one be different? And yet, there was something undeniably unique about the construction. The asphalt stopper perfectly sealed the copper tube inside the jar, preventing leakage. The iron rod was carefully positioned, never touching the copper directly, just as in modern batteries. If an acidic liquid such as vinegar, lemon juice, or fermented grape juice were poured inside, the device could indeed generate a small electrical charge. The discovery sparked a wave of fascination. The Baghdad Battery was soon displayed in museums, and scientists began experimenting with replicas. When filled with vinegar, these reconstructions produced a voltage of about 1 volt, not much by modern standards, but enough to cause a tingle when touched. The simplicity of the design seemed to suggest intention rather than accident. The more the public heard of it, the more the Baghdad Battery became a symbol of ancient mystery. For some, it was proof that ancient civilizations were far more advanced than history gave them credit for. For others, it was a puzzle, a reminder that archaeology is often less about finding definitive answers and more about uncovering new questions. The late 1930s were a turbulent time, and the discovery did not immediately gain widespread scholarly attention. World War II soon engulfed much of Europe, and academic discussions about a curious Mesopotamian jar seemed a distant concern. Still, the Baghdad Battery lingered in the background, resurfacing in the decades to follow as researchers, engineers, and even television producers revisited the enigma. For König, however, the discovery was deeply personal. He had found an object that seemed to defy the boundaries of time. He once wrote that if the jar truly was a battery, then history itself would need rewriting. His words resonated with both wonder and caution. If ancient people had indeed harnessed electricity, what other forgotten technologies might lie buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia? As decades passed, the story of the Baghdad Battery would only grow. It would become a fixture in discussions about lost knowledge, a favorite subject of fringe theories, and a challenge to conventional history. But before exploring those later debates, it is important to return to the artifact itself, this humble clay jar with its copper and iron heart. For in that small vessel lies a mystery that bridges the worlds of archaeology, science, and imagination. It reminds us that history is not always a straight line of progress, but a complex web of discoveries, inventions, and forgotten experiments. Whether the Baghdad Battery was truly a tool of science or simply a misunderstood artifact, its discovery marked the beginning of one of archaeology's greatest modern puzzles. In the dust of Mesopotamia, under the hot sun of Iraq, an ancient jar was unearthed, and with it, perhaps, the spark of electricity from a forgotten age. To understand the Baghdad Battery, one must first step into the world that created it, a world of bustling cities, rich trade networks, and civilizations that flourished along the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Mesopotamia, often called the cradle of civilization, was home to some of the earliest experiments in human society, law, writing, and technology. But by the time the Baghdad Battery was crafted, the land had passed through countless rulers, each leaving its mark on the soil and stone of the region. The artifact is generally attributed to the Parthian period, roughly between 250 BCE and 250 CE, though some suggest a Sasanian origin slightly later. This was an era of remarkable cultural and scientific activity. The Parthians ruled a vast empire stretching from the Mediterranean to India, connecting trade routes that allowed the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across continents. They were renowned for their metallurgy, producing weapons, tools, and ornaments with skill that would rival civilization centuries later. They also engaged in alchemy, the early study of chemical reactions and materials, which, while often entwined with mysticism, laid foundations for modern chemistry. Cities in Mesopotamia during this period were vibrant centers of life. Markets bustled with merchants selling textiles, spices, and metalwork. Scholars and scribes copied manuscripts by hand, preserving knowledge from previous empires and distant lands. Temples dominated the skyline, not only as religious centers, but also as hubs of learning, astronomy, and mathematics. The Parthians, like the civilizations before them, understood the power of organized labor and technology. They could construct monumental buildings, intricate irrigation systems, and durable roads linking distant cities. It is within this context that the Baghdad Battery must be considered. The Parthians and Sasanians were familiar with copper, iron, and other metals, and their artisans were capable of precise, careful work. To roll copper into a tight cylinder, fit it snugly into a clay vessel, and suspend an iron rod in its center, these were not accidental acts. They required planning, skill, and an understanding of materials that went beyond simple utility. Yet the question remains, did Mesopotamians of this era understand electricity in any meaningful way? Modern science suggests that electricity was not recognized as a natural force until the experiments of William Gilbert in the 16th century, and later formalized by Benjamin Franklin and Alessandro Volta. But, as experiments with the Baghdad Battery have shown, the components could produce a small electric charge when filled with acidic liquids. Could the Parthians have observed this phenomenon? Possibly, not as a force to light lamps or power machines, but perhaps as a chemical reaction useful for practical or ritual purposes. The Mesopotamian culture was deeply intertwined with both the natural and the supernatural. Many ancient practices involved experimenting with metals, acids, and other substances to create medicinal potions, dyes, or plated ornaments. Scholars have suggested that the Baghdad Battery could have been used to electroplate objects with thin layers of metal, a process useful in decorative arts. Even if the creators did not understand the underlying science, they might have discovered a technique that produced observable results: a faint glow, a tingle, or a chemical change. Trade played a crucial role in this knowledge. Mesopotamia was a hub connecting the Silk Road in the east and the Mediterranean world in the west. Goods, ideas, and even scientific curiosities moved along these routes. It is conceivable that knowledge of primitive galvanic reactions, or at least experimentation with metals and acids, spread through these networks. The Baghdad Battery, then, could represent a fusion of local ingenuity and cross-cultural experimentation. Artisans and scholars were not the only ones shaping life in Mesopotamia. Religion and ritual were equally influential. Temples, where priests acted as both spiritual leaders and custodians of knowledge, often contained laboratories of sorts. Here, sacred oils were prepared, metals were refined for ritual items, and experiments that blurred the line between science and spirituality were conducted. It is within these temples and workshops that a device like the Baghdad Battery could have emerged, not as a tool for powering machines, but as a practical or symbolic object, harnessing natural reactions in a controlled environment. Life outside the cities was no less complex. Farmers relied on sophisticated irrigation systems, engineers designed bridges and canals, and traders navigated rivers with remarkable precision. Each advancement required knowledge of materials, observation of natural phenomena, and careful experimentation. It was a world in which curiosity and necessity often drove innovation, and the Baghdad Battery fits neatly into this narrative. A small, enigmatic object born from a culture capable of remarkable ingenuity. Yet the story of Mesopotamia is also one of lost knowledge. Time, conquest, and shifting empires erased countless artifacts, leaving only fragments behind. Many techniques, experiments, and observations vanished with the fall of civilizations. The Baghdad Battery is a rare survivor, a tiny window into a world that understood more than we often give it credit for. As we examine this ancient society, one thing becomes clear. The Parthians and Sasanians were sophisticated thinkers, experimenting with the materials around them in ways that sometimes bordered on the miraculous. The Baghdad Battery is not just an artifact. It is a testament to human curiosity, a symbol of the quest to understand and manipulate the natural world, even in an age without formal science. In the next section, we will explore how modern scientists and researchers have tried to reconstruct and understand the Baghdad Battery, conducting experiments to test its potential, and uncovering whether this ancient object truly held the spark of electricity, or if it remains an enduring enigma of history. Centuries separated the creators of the Baghdad Battery from the modern scientists who would later attempt to understand it, yet curiosity knows no bounds. Once the artifact was unearthed and displayed in museums, it did not take long for researchers to ask the most pressing question. Could this small clay jar, copper cylinder, and iron rod actually produce electricity? The first experiments were cautious. Scientists reconstructed replicas of the Baghdad Battery using materials similar to the original artifact: clay jars, copper cylinders rolled to the correct size, iron rods, and asphalt stoppers. They then filled the jars with various liquids that could serve as electrolytes, substances capable of conducting electricity. Vinegar was a common choice, as were grape juice, lemon juice, and even wine. When the iron rod and copper cylinder were immersed in these liquids, the reaction was immediate. A small electric current flowed through the metals, measurable with modern instruments. The voltage was modest, roughly 1 volt per jar, yet it was enough to create a mild tingling sensation when touched. This simple reaction proved König's hypothesis plausible. The Baghdad Battery could, in theory, generate electricity. Researchers also experimented with connecting multiple jars in series, much like the cells in a modern battery. By doing so, they were able to amplify the voltage, demonstrating that the ancient design could potentially produce more power than a single jar alone. Though still insufficient for powering lights or machinery, the voltage was adequate for small electroplating experiments or chemical reactions. Electroplating became a central focus. In electroplating, a thin layer of metal is deposited onto a surface by passing an electric current through a solution containing metal ions. Scientists theorized that the Baghdad Battery could have been used to plate objects with gold, silver, or copper, creating ornamental or ceremonial items. When testing replicas with small metal sheets submerged in an electrolyte solution, they observed thin coatings forming over time, a result consistent with the principles of electroplating. Despite these promising results, skeptics raised valid concerns. There was no direct evidence that the Parthians or Sasanians used the device in this manner. No records, inscriptions, or surviving electroplated objects could be definitively linked to the battery. Critics argued that the jars could just as easily have been used for mundane purposes, such as storing scrolls, sacred oils, or small offerings. The problem, as always with archaeology, is interpretation. The evidence is incomplete, and conclusions remain speculative. To explore the full potential of the Baghdad Battery, scientists also turned to chemical analysis. Modern replicas were subjected to controlled experiments, testing different electrolyte solutions and measuring the resulting voltage and current. They found that acidic solutions like vinegar produced the strongest reaction, while water or neutral liquids resulted in little to no current. Temperature also played a role. Warmer solutions slightly increased the chemical reaction, hinting that the original users might have noticed variations in performance depending on conditions. Further analysis revealed another key insight. The choice of materials was deliberate. The copper cylinder and iron rod were carefully fashioned to maximize surface contact while preventing direct contact between the metals, which would short-circuit the device. The asphalt stopper sealed the jar, preserving the electrolyte for longer periods and preventing evaporation. These details suggest that the design was functional rather than accidental, implying at least some understanding of cause and effect in the reaction. Some researchers extended the experiments by incorporating multiple jars in tandem, simulating what might have been a primitive power source for small tools or ceremonial devices. While the results were modest, the exercise demonstrated that the concept was theoretically sound. In other words, the Baghdad Battery could work as a battery. It was not just a coincidence of metal and clay. Yet despite these fascinating findings, uncertainty persists. Even with modern reconstructions, the precise purpose of the battery remains unknown. Was it a tool for scientific curiosity, a practical device for electroplating, or a ritual object imbued with symbolic meaning? Or was it simply a container misinterpreted by later observers? Researchers acknowledge that without direct historical records, definitive answers may never be found. The Baghdad Battery also attracted attention from the fringe science community. Television programs, books, and online media speculated wildly about its capabilities, suggesting that it powered lamps, ancient machines, or even mysterious energy devices. While entertaining, these claims are not supported by archaeological evidence. The more grounded experiments, however, demonstrate a subtler, but no less remarkable truth. Ancient people may have observed and manipulated chemical reactions in ways that produced electricity, long before it was formally understood. One particularly fascinating experiment involved connecting a replica of the Baghdad Battery to a modern light-emitting diode, LED. The current was insufficient to illuminate the LED fully, but it flickered faintly, offering a tangible connection between ancient curiosity and modern technology. This experiment captured the imagination of both scientists and the public, illustrating that the Baghdad Battery was not merely a relic. It was a bridge across millennia, connecting ancient experimentation with contemporary understanding. The scientific analysis of the Baghdad Battery teaches us several lessons. First, ingenuity is universal. Ancient people could observe, experiment, and apply knowledge even without the theoretical frameworks we take for granted today. Second, small, modest discoveries can spark profound questions about the history of technology. Finally, the Baghdad Battery reminds us that history is often more complex than textbooks suggest, filled with anomalies and mysteries that challenge our assumptions. As we examine these experiments, one thing becomes clear. The Baghdad Battery was more than a jar of clay and metal. It was a testament to the human desire to explore, to test, and to manipulate the natural world. Whether used for electroplating, rituals, or as a curiosity, it represents an early chapter in humanity's long journey to understand electricity, a journey that would not reach modern comprehension until centuries later. In the next section, we will explore the possible uses of the Baghdad Battery, examining the various theories proposed by scholars and enthusiasts alike. Was it a tool of technology, a ritual object, or simply a misunderstood artifact? The answers, like the artifact itself, remain tantalizingly just out of reach. With the scientific analysis in mind, the next question naturally arises. What was the Baghdad Battery used for? Scholars and enthusiasts alike have proposed a wide range of possibilities, each theory attempting to reconcile the artifact's design with the practical and cultural realities of ancient Mesopotamia. The most frequently cited hypothesis is electroplating. Electroplating is a process in which a thin layer of metal, such as gold or silver, is deposited onto the surface of another metal using an electric current. Modern reconstructions of the Baghdad Battery, when filled with acidic liquids and connected to small metal sheets, can produce this effect. Some researchers suggest that artisans may have used the battery to create decorative items, jewelry, or ceremonial objects with gilded surfaces. If true, it would mean the Parthians or Sasanians had an early, practical understanding of electricity's potential. However, skeptics point out that no surviving electroplated artifacts have been definitively linked to the Baghdad Battery. While electroplating was known in ancient times, ancient Egyptians practiced it using chemical means. There is no direct evidence that the Baghdad Battery served this purpose. Yet, the possibility cannot be dismissed entirely, as many artifacts from this period have been lost, decayed, or remain undiscovered. Another widely discussed theory is that the Baghdad Battery was used in religious or ritual contexts. Electricity, or at least the small shocks produced by the device, could have had symbolic or mystical significance. Imagine a priest or alchemist filling the jar with acidic juice, producing a subtle current, and using it to energize sacred objects. In a culture where the divine and natural worlds were closely intertwined, such an experiment might have been viewed as a way to harness unseen forces, a mystical or ceremonial tool rather than a practical one. Medical applications have also been proposed. Some modern commentators speculate that the battery could have been used for therapeutic purposes, perhaps to relieve pain or treat ailments. Ancient Mesopotamian medicine was a combination of herbal remedies, spiritual rituals, and empirical observation. A mild electric shock could have been perceived as a form of treatment, even if its physiological effects were minimal or inconsistent. While no written records confirm this usage, the theory highlights the ingenuity and experimentation that characterized the era. There is also the mundane possibility that the artifact was simply a storage container, cleverly designed to hold scrolls, scroll weights, or sacred oils. Many critics argue that historians may be overinterpreting its function, projecting modern assumptions onto an ancient object. After all, thousands of clay jars have been found across Mesopotamia, most with purely utilitarian purposes. The Baghdad Battery might have been no more than a well-crafted vessel, with its metal core intended for support or ornamentation rather than electricity. Some researchers have explored symbolic explanations. Could the battery have represented knowledge, power, or divine inspiration? In a society that valued craftsmanship and mysticism, creating an object that produced a small, seemingly magical effect might have been more important than any practical application. The Parthians and Sasanians were known to blend science, art, and spirituality, and the battery could exemplify this fusion, a testament to curiosity and craftsmanship. Interestingly, comparative studies suggest that the Baghdad Battery was not an isolated case. Other ancient civilizations, including the Egyptians and Greeks, experimented with metals, acids, and natural reactions in ways that could generate small amounts of electricity. The Baghdad Battery might therefore be part of a broader tradition of early electrochemical experimentation, a hint that ancient societies were exploring natural forces long before formal science existed. Each theory about the battery's purpose has its strengths and weaknesses, which is why the artifact continues to fascinate both scholars and the public. The electroplating hypothesis aligns well with scientific experiments, but lacks direct archaeological evidence. Ritualistic or symbolic uses fit with Mesopotamian culture, but remain speculative. Medical applications and mundane storage theories are plausible but less exciting. What emerges from these debates is not a definitive answer, but a portrait of a society curious enough to experiment with the unknown. The Baghdad Battery also reveals the tension between modern interpretation and historical context. When we view it through the lens of contemporary science, it is tempting to see electricity and assume advanced knowledge. Yet for its creators, the jar may have been part of daily life, ceremonial practice, or a simple craft experiment. Our fascination with electricity colors our perspective, while the ancient people who built it may have had entirely different goals. Some historians suggest that the battery was never intended to produce significant electricity at all. It may have been an educational tool, a way to demonstrate the reaction between metals and acidic substances, or a curiosity for scholars and apprentices. In that sense, the Baghdad Battery could have been the ancient equivalent of a science experiment, designed to provoke observation and understanding rather than practical application. Regardless of its true function, the Baghdad Battery has captured the imagination of countless generations. Its possible uses spark debates that blend archaeology, chemistry, history, and philosophy, reminding us that every artifact tells multiple stories. Was it a tool, a toy, a sacred object, or a lost technology? Perhaps it was all of these things, or perhaps its purpose remains forever mysterious, lost to time like so many secrets buried beneath the sands of Mesopotamia. In exploring the possible uses of the Baghdad Battery, we confront the broader question of human curiosity and ingenuity. Ancient people were not passive observers of their world. They experimented, observed, and created. Even in the absence of modern science, they discovered chemical reactions, manipulated materials, and produced effects that still astonish us today. The battery stands as a symbol of this relentless pursuit of knowledge, a reminder that innovation often precedes explanation, and that the line between science, art, and ritual can be beautifully blurred. As we move to the next section, we will examine the role of myth, speculation, and pseudoscience in shaping the modern understanding of the Baghdad Battery. How has this small artifact, unearthed in the sands of Iraq, inspired stories that range from plausible science to fantastical claims of lost civilizations? The answers, as always, lie somewhere between fact and imagination. While the Baghdad Battery has fascinated historians and scientists, it has captured the public imagination in ways that extend far beyond academia. Over the decades, this small clay jar has become a symbol of mystery and speculation, inspiring stories that blend fact, conjecture, and sometimes outright fantasy. In the process, it has entered the world of myth and pseudoscience, a status few archaeological artifacts achieve. The allure of the Baghdad Battery lies in its apparent anachronism. Electricity, as a formal concept, was not understood until centuries after the Parthians and Sasanians had long vanished. Yet here was an object that could, under the right conditions, produce a small electric charge. For many, this implied that ancient civilizations possessed knowledge far beyond what history has recorded, a tantalizing idea that has fueled speculation for generations. One of the most popular and controversial theories is that the Baghdad Battery was evidence of lost technology, an advanced device whose secrets were forgotten by time. Authors and television programs exploring ancient mysteries have suggested that the battery could have powered lamps, machinery, or even sophisticated devices that predated modern science by centuries. In the realm of speculative history, the artifact became proof that human progress might not be linear, but cyclical, with knowledge lost and rediscovered across the ages. This fascination soon intertwined with the world of ancient astronaut theories. Advocates of this idea claim that extraterrestrial visitors influenced human development and shared advanced technology with early civilizations. The Baghdad Battery, capable of generating electricity, is frequently cited as evidence supporting these claims. Popular media often presents dramatic reconstructions, glowing jars, humming devices, and civilizations harnessing unknown power. While visually captivating, such interpretations are not supported by any archaeological evidence. The battery remains a simple chemical device, not proof of alien intervention. Even in more grounded discussions, myth and exaggeration have colored the narrative. Articles, documentaries, and books have repeatedly overstated its capabilities, suggesting that it could light bulbs or power motors, claims modern reconstructions cannot support. Experiments with replicas consistently demonstrate a low-voltage output, sufficient perhaps for electroplating or mild shocks, but far from what would be required for large-scale energy applications. Yet the image of an ancient electric battery continues to capture imaginations worldwide, showing how a kernel of truth can evolve into legend. The Baghdad Battery has also become a touchstone for debates about scientific interpretation and historical evidence. Scholars caution against assuming that every unusual artifact must have been a high-tech device. Misinterpretation can result from modern biases, where we project contemporary understanding onto the past. Just because an object can perform a function familiar to us today does not mean that its creators intended that purpose. In this sense, the Baghdad Battery serves as a cautionary tale. It challenges us to balance curiosity with skepticism, imagination with evidence. At the same time, the mythos surrounding the battery has had positive effects. Its fame has inspired students, amateur archaeologists, and scientists to recreate experiments, investigate ancient technologies, and explore the history of electricity. Even if some claims are exaggerated, the artifact has encouraged a deeper appreciation of the ingenuity and experimentation of ancient civilizations. It has become a bridge between past and present, science and storytelling, fact and fiction. One particularly striking example of modern mythmaking comes from television documentaries and online videos that portray the battery as part of an ancient electrical network. In these narratives, multiple batteries were allegedly wired together to power lamps or ceremonial devices. While visually dramatic, these theories lack any archaeological corroboration. No traces of wiring, lamps, or electrical appliances have been found in Parthian or Sasanian sites. These stories, though entertaining, belong firmly to the realm of speculation rather than historical fact. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, these myths, the Baghdad Battery continues to intrigue researchers. Scholars have had to grapple with questions about human perception, storytelling, and the desire for wonder. Why do we so easily turn a small clay jar into a relic of lost technology or alien intervention? Part of the answer lies in our fascination with the unknown, the gap between what we understand and what remains mysterious. The battery represents a physical manifestation of that gap, a small, unassuming object that sparks questions far larger than itself. The mythic reputation of the Baghdad Battery also highlights a broader issue in archaeology: the tension between discovery and interpretation. Every artifact must be interpreted through the lens of its context, materials, and culture. When context is incomplete, as it is with the battery, interpretation becomes speculative. Over time, speculation can become legend, and legend can overshadow evidence. For the Baghdad Battery, the line between science and myth is thin, demonstrating both the allure and the danger of ancient mysteries. Despite these challenges, one truth remains clear. The Baghdad Battery has become more than a museum piece. It is a cultural icon, a symbol of curiosity, experimentation, and the human desire to explore the unknown. Its story encourages us to ask questions, to investigate boldly, and to embrace the unknown without losing sight of evidence. In this way, even the myths surrounding the artifact have value. They remind us that history is a living conversation, shaped by imagination as much as by facts. As we move to the final section of this documentary, we will explore the legacy and enduring mystery of the Baghdad Battery. From its humble discovery in Iraq to its place in global popular culture, the battery challenges our understanding of ancient science, human ingenuity, and the thin line between fact and imagination. The story of the Baghdad Battery does not end with its discovery, analysis, or the myths it inspired. In many ways, its true significance lies in the legacy it leaves behind, the questions it raises, the imagination it sparks, and the bridge it forms between past and present. This small, unassuming clay jar has become an enduring symbol of human curiosity, ingenuity, and the eternal search for knowledge. Since its unearthing near Baghdad in 1938, the battery has been a subject of fascination for scholars, engineers, archaeologists, and the general public alike. It represents a rare connection to a world that existed nearly 2,000 years ago, a world in which people experimented with metals, acids, and chemical reactions in ways that challenge our assumptions about the sophistication of ancient technology. Even if its true purpose remains elusive, the battery proves that innovation and experimentation are not exclusively modern traits. They are as old as civilization itself. The Baghdad Battery has also left a profound impact on the study of ancient science and technology. Archaeologists and historians have been forced to consider the possibility that ancient societies were capable of more than previously thought. While textbooks often present history as a linear progression of discoveries, the battery serves as a reminder that the past is far more complex. Civilizations like the Parthians and Sasanians were not merely primitive predecessors. They were observers, experimenters, and innovators. The battery may be small, but its implications are monumental. It demonstrates that scientific curiosity existed long before formalized experimentation and modern instruments. Beyond the realm of science, the Baghdad Battery has influenced popular culture and imagination. It appears in books, television documentaries, online videos, and museum exhibits as a symbol of mystery and lost knowledge. Writers and filmmakers have used it as inspiration for stories of ancient technologies, secret inventions, and civilizations ahead of their time. Its allure lies not just in what it could do, but in what it represents, the possibility that the past holds secrets we are only beginning to understand. Yet the battery also offers a cautionary lesson about the interpretation of history. The myths and pseudoscientific claims surrounding it highlight how easily curiosity can morph into speculation. When we project modern assumptions onto ancient objects, we risk misunderstanding their true context. The Baghdad Battery reminds us that while imagination is a powerful tool, it must be balanced with evidence and critical thinking. History is not a canvas for our fantasies. It is a puzzle, and every artifact is a piece that must be carefully studied before conclusions are drawn. Despite the uncertainty, there is no denying the battery's educational and inspirational value. Scientists and students continue to replicate experiments, learning about chemical reactions, electrochemistry, and ancient metallurgy in the process. Museums use the artifact to spark curiosity, demonstrating that even small, enigmatic objects can ignite a lifelong passion for history and science. The Baghdad Battery is, in essence, a teaching tool, showing how observation, experimentation, and critical thinking transcend time. Its story also emphasizes the fragility of human knowledge. So much of what ancient civilizations knew has been lost due to war, neglect, or natural decay. The Baghdad Battery survives as one of the few tangible links to experimentation in antiquity, reminding us that discoveries often come to us incomplete, fragmentary, and open to interpretation. Each generation that studies it adds another layer of understanding, contributing to a conversation that spans centuries. In a broader sense, the Baghdad Battery invites reflection on the nature of human curiosity. Throughout history, people have been driven to explore the unknown, test the limits of their knowledge, and push the boundaries of what is possible. Whether it was experimenting with metals and acids in ancient Mesopotamia, observing celestial movements, or developing early engineering techniques, humans have always sought to understand and manipulate the world around them. The battery is a small but powerful symbol of that timeless pursuit. Even today, the battery continues to inspire debate, research, and wonder. Archaeologists study its context, materials scientists test its properties, and enthusiasts speculate about its uses. Its influence stretches across disciplines, connecting history, science, art, and imagination. The artifact itself may be silent, but it speaks volumes about human ingenuity, curiosity, and the enduring mystery of the past. In the final analysis, the Baghdad Battery remains an enigma. Was it a practical device, a ceremonial tool, a scientific curiosity, or something else entirely? The truth may never be fully known, yet in its mystery lies its power. It challenges our assumptions, sparks inquiry, and reminds us that history is not merely a record of what we know, but also a gateway to what we have yet to discover. As we conclude this journey, we are left with a profound sense of awe. From its quiet excavation near Baghdad to its place in global imagination, the Baghdad Battery exemplifies the ingenuity, curiosity, and creativity of ancient civilizations. It is a testament to the human spirit, capable of wonder, experimentation, and discovery, even in an age long before modern science. In the end, the Baghdad Battery does not just tell the story of a jar and two metals, it tells the story of humanity itself, striving, experimenting, imagining, and reaching toward the unknown. Its legacy is not measured by voltage or current, but by the spark it ignites in every mind curious enough to ask, what else did the ancients know?